She wrote, "Help," on the napkin. The vampire king at table 17 noticed before the waiter. "Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was another busy night at the Crimson Crescent, a high-end restaurant in downtown New York City. The sound of silverware clinking against fine china mixed with the soft hum of conversation and laughter. Mia Chun, a young waitress, rushed between tables, balancing trays of food and drinks, trying to keep her composure as the night grew busier. She was used to the chaos, but tonight felt different. The stress was mounting as she glanced at the clock, just past 9, and still, the restaurant was packed with customers, many of them regulars. But tonight, something was off. She felt it in the air, a sense of unease that she couldn't shake. Mia had been working at the Crimson Crescent for just over a year now. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. She had a young daughter at home and had to make ends meet. So she kept her head down and did what she had to do. But as she walked toward table 17, her heart skipped a beat. She had seen him before, but only from a distance. The man sitting at the head of the table, dressed in a dark suit that looked too expensive for the average customer, had an aura of power that was hard to ignore. His cold, amber eyes scanned the room as if he were looking for something or someone. Mia had heard the rumors about him, the stories that circulated about the mysterious CEO, but she never imagined she'd be serving him. Tonight, however, he was different. He wasn't just any powerful businessman. No, this man was different. As Mia approached his table, the man's piercing gaze landed on her. For a moment, she froze, unsure of what to do. He didn't say a word, just watched her intently. She cleared her throat, forcing herself to speak. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice steady but betraying a hint of nervousness. He nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "A glass of red wine, please," he replied in a voice that was calm, almost too calm. She nodded, trying to shake off the feeling that something was wrong. As she turned to walk away, a soft thud echoed behind her. It was the sound of a napkin being crumpled on the table. Her instincts kicked in, and she glanced back, her eyes locking with his for a split second. He didn't look away. His gaze was steady, unwavering, and somehow unnerving. As she made her way to the bar to get his wine, a strange sensation filled her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the faintest rustling of paper. She turned back to see the man at table 17 still watching her. But now, there was something else. A napkin lay on the table in front of him, and it wasn't crumpled anymore. The words, "Help," were scrawled hastily on the napkin. Mia's heart raced. Who would leave such a message? And why would he be looking at her so intently now? She tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, but something told her that she had just stepped into something much bigger than she realized. As she returned with his wine, she couldn't help but wonder, was he the one who needed help, or was there something more sinister behind the message? Little did Mia know, her night was about to take a dramatic turn, and the vampire king at table 17 was about to change her life forever. As Mia returned to table 17 with the wine, her heart pounded in her chest. She had tried to push away the strange feeling from the napkin message, but it gnawed at her thoughts. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the wine glass down in front of the man. He didn't speak, just nodded and continued to observe her. There was an intensity in his gaze that made her skin prickle. It wasn't the way a regular customer looked at her. It was as if he was studying her, seeing through her, and it made her feel like she was standing under a spotlight. "Enjoy your drink, sir," she said quietly, unable to mask the unease in her voice. He barely acknowledged her words, his eyes flicking to the napkin once more. Mia's breath caught when she realized it wasn't the same napkin she had seen earlier. This one was carefully folded, placed with a deliberate precision in front of him, as if he had been waiting for something or someone. Her heart raced faster. "Are you all right, miss?" A voice suddenly interrupted her thoughts. It was one of the other waitstaff, a young man who seemed to have noticed her momentary pause. Mia quickly straightened up, forcing a smile. "Yes, just a little distracted. I'll be fine." As she turned to leave, the man's voice stopped her. "I believe you dropped this," he said, holding out a small silver coin. Mia frowned, confused. She hadn't dropped anything. But there it was, a coin she didn't recognize. It was heavy, and its surface was unusually smooth, almost too polished. "Thank you," she said, taking the coin from him. But as her fingers brushed against the cold metal, a strange chill ran down her spine. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," the man said, his voice soft but commanding. She nodded quickly and walked away, still unsure of what had just happened. As she made her way through the restaurant, her mind raced. What was going on with table 17? Who was he, really? She had never seen anyone quite like him. The way he held himself, the way he spoke, and the way the room seemed to shift around him. It was as if he wasn't just another wealthy businessman. He was something more. And the napkin, that message, it had to mean something. She had seen many things in her time working at the restaurant, but never something like this. Mia tried to focus on her next tables, but her mind kept drifting back to the mysterious man at table 17. Her thoughts were interrupted when the restaurant manager appeared beside her. "Mia, can you check on the VIP section? They've been waiting for their dessert," he said, snapping her out of her trance. She nodded, forcing herself to shake off the strange encounter. But as she moved toward the back, she couldn't shake the feeling that her night had just taken a turn for the worse. When Mia finally reached the VIP section, she noticed something unsettling. The man at table 17 wasn't alone anymore. He had company now, 2 others, tall, dark, and dressed in expensive suits that matched the aura of authority the man exuded. Mia hesitated for a moment. She had never seen these people before, but there was something about them that made her feel like she was standing in the presence of something far beyond her understanding. She swallowed hard and walked over, trying to ignore the increasing sense of dread settling in her stomach. As she approached the table, one of the men, an older figure with graying hair and piercing eyes, looked up at her. His gaze was icy, studying her, as if deciding whether or not she was worth his attention. "Can I help you, sir?" Mia asked, her voice slightly shaky. The man smiled coldly. "You can start by telling us what you know about the message," he said, his voice low but commanding. Mia froze. "Message?" she asked, her mind racing. The man at table 17 hadn't said a word to her about it, but it was clear now that something had happened that she wasn't aware of. "The napkin. The message you left on it. We know about it," the man continued, his eyes narrowing. Mia's heart skipped a beat. How could they know about that? She hadn't told anyone, not even the other waitstaff. I didn't leave any message," she stammered, her mind reeling. The man's smile faded, replaced by a look of frustration. "We know what you did," he said, his tone now a warning. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Mia could feel the weight of his words settle in the air around her, making it hard to breathe. Now, the man at table 17 finally spoke, his voice smooth and calm. "Tell me what you've seen." "Everything." Mia stood there, her mind racing. The tension in the room was suffocating. She had no idea what was going on, but she felt an overwhelming sense that her life had just changed. The vampire king at table 17 was no longer just a mystery. He was a part of something much darker, and she was caught right in the middle of it. As the atmosphere in the VIP section grew colder, Mia felt her heart race uncontrollably. The man at table 17, who she now knew was the vampire king, stared at her with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. He said nothing, but his presence alone was enough to make her feel small and insignificant. The 2 men who sat with him seemed equally imposing, their expressions unreadable. Mia felt as though she had been swept into a world far beyond her comprehension. "What do you want from me?" Mia asked, her voice shaking as she tried to hold her composure. The older man, the one who had spoken to her earlier, gave her a cold smile. "We want to know what you saw, what you heard," he said. Mia's mind raced. She didn't understand what they were talking about. She had simply delivered the wine and noticed the napkin with the word help on it. What could they possibly want from her? She glanced at the vampire king, who was now watching her with a calculated look. His amber eyes seemed to pierce through her, searching for something hidden. I don't know what you mean," Mia stammered, trying to push down the growing panic in her chest. The older man's smile faded, replaced by a look of frustration. "We know you saw something. The napkin," he repeated, his voice sharp. "You wrote help on it, didn't you?" Mia's breath caught in her throat. She had written nothing. She hadn't left any message for him. Yet, somehow they knew. Her mind spun with confusion. I didn't write anything. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice almost a whisper. The Vampire King's gaze shifted, and he stood up slowly, moving with an almost predatory grace. His movements were so fluid, so controlled, it made Mia's heart skip a beat. You saw the message, he said softly, his voice like velvet. You wrote it, but you don't remember, do you? Mia's eyes widened. He was speaking as though she had been the one to leave the message, but she couldn't remember doing so. The room seemed to spin as a wave of dizziness washed over her. No, she whispered, taking a step back. I didn't write it. I swear. But the Vampire King wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on her, and for a moment, it felt as though time itself had frozen. You're lying, he said quietly, his voice filled with an unsettling calm. You've seen something, Mia, something you don't fully understand. Something that has been buried deep inside you for years. Mia felt her knees weaken as the weight of his words hit her. How could he know her name? How could he know anything about her? I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice breaking. But the Vampire King was already moving closer. You are connected to this world, whether you know it or not, he said, his voice low and commanding. You can't hide from the truth. It will find you, just as you have found it. Mia took another step back, but there was nowhere to run. The room seemed to close in on her as the Vampire King's presence became overwhelming. His power was tangible, and for the first time in her life, Mia felt completely powerless. She could feel the weight of the secret they were hiding pressing against her, suffocating her. Please, Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't want any part of this. I just want to go home. The Vampire King's gaze softened for a moment, but his expression quickly returned to one of cold indifference. You don't have a choice, he said simply. You are already a part of it. As he spoke, the two men who had been sitting with him stood up. One of them, the younger of the two, stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. We need you to come with us, Mia, he said, his voice flat. You're a witness, and you know too much. Mia's stomach churned. What had she gotten herself into? She had no idea what was happening, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life would never be the same again. The Vampire King turned to leave, but not before one final, lingering look at Mia. We will see you soon, he said. Don't try to escape. There is nowhere you can run. With that, he and his companions left the restaurant, leaving Mia standing in the center of the room, completely stunned. As the door to the VIP section clicked shut behind them, Mia felt as though her world had just been turned upside down. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. She had never been involved in anything like this before, and yet, now she was caught in the middle of something far bigger than herself. Something that involved the Vampire King, a hidden message, and a fate she couldn't escape. The restaurant felt colder now, the once familiar atmosphere now replaced with an eerie silence. Mia looked down at the napkin on the table, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what was going on, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a part of something much darker, and there was no going back. The air in the restaurant was thick with tension as Mia stood frozen in place, her thoughts racing. The Vampire King and his companions had left, but the feeling of dread lingered, suffocating her. She glanced around, noticing how the restaurant had fallen silent. The usual hum of conversation seemed distant, almost as if the world outside of table 17 no longer mattered. Her heart still pounded in her chest, and her hands trembled as she gripped the napkin she had just placed on the table moments before. The words "help" were etched into it like a scar, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something far darker than she could imagine. Mia didn't know how long she stood there, staring at the napkin. Her mind felt like it was spinning out of control, each thought colliding with the next, making it impossible to think straight. She had never been involved in anything like this before. She was just a waitress, a single mother trying to make ends meet. But now, she was tangled up in a web of secrets, one that seemed to have no way out. Her eyes darted to the back of the restaurant, where the kitchen staff moved in a blur, unaware of what had just transpired. No one else seemed to notice the weight in the air. It was as if the world had moved on, but Mia was stuck in a moment she couldn't escape. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The Vampire King had left with his companions, but the message he left behind was clear. She wasn't free of this. She wasn't free of him. The thought made her stomach churn. The door to the kitchen swung open, and Marcus, the restaurant manager, stepped out. His eyes flicked over to her, and Mia felt a sudden jolt of panic. Had he seen the exchange? Had he noticed anything unusual? Mia, Marcus called, his voice strained. We need to talk. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She nodded slowly, and followed him to the staff room at the back. The door shut behind them with a soft click, and she took a seat, her mind still reeling. What's going on? Marcus asked, his voice filled with suspicion. You were acting strange after you spoke to the VIP table. What happened? Mia opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She couldn't explain what had just occurred. She couldn't tell him about the message, about the vampire king, about the way he had looked at her. It's nothing, she said finally, her voice betraying her. I was just a little shaken up. Marcus frowned. Shaken up by what? Come on, Mia, you can tell me. She looked down at her hands, trying to steady her breathing. She couldn't tell him the truth. She couldn't even tell herself the truth. It's nothing, she repeated. I'm fine. Marcus seemed to buy it for the moment, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. He wasn't convinced. All right, he said slowly. But if anything's wrong, you know you can talk to me. We've got your back. Mia nodded, grateful for the offer, but knowing that there was nothing anyone could do. She was in this alone. As she left the staff room and returned to the floor, the rest of the night blurred together. She moved on autopilot, serving drinks, clearing plates, and trying to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. She had always been able to shake off the stress, to compartmentalize it. But tonight, it was different. Something was off. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. No matter where she went in the restaurant, no matter how busy she kept herself, there was always a pair of eyes on her. It was as if the vampire king's gaze was still following her, even though he had already left. By the time her shift ended, Mia was exhausted. Her body ached from the long hours, and her mind felt like it was running in circles. She didn't even know what to think anymore. As she walked out of the restaurant and into the cold night air, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She fished it out, her fingers numb from the chill, and saw a message from an unknown number. We will be watching. Don't think you can. Run. The king wants to see you again. Mia's breath hitched, her heart pounding in her chest. She stared at the screen, her mind unable to process the words. The vampire king? Watching her? The message felt like a warning, but a warning for what? She had no answers, only questions that were growing more and more insistent. She stared at the dark streets ahead of her, the city lights flickering in the distance. She had no idea what she was about to face, but one thing was clear. Her life had changed in ways she couldn't begin to understand. And there was no going back. The following morning, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that her life had spiraled out of control. The cold air outside did nothing to calm her racing thoughts as she made her way home. Every streetlight she passed seemed to cast longer shadows, the quiet hum of the city now a constant reminder of the events that had unfolded the night before. The message on her phone lingered in her mind, echoing in her head like a warning she couldn't ignore. We will be watching. Don't think you can run. The king wants to see you again. The vampire king. The same man who had been seated at table 17. The one whose gaze had pierced her very soul. What did he want with her? She had no answers, only questions that refused to stop. As she entered her small apartment, her daughter's voice broke through her thoughts. Mommy, you're home. Mia smiled weakly, bending down to hug her little girl, but even as she did, her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't shake the feeling that something dangerous was looming, something she wasn't prepared for. Are you okay, Mommy? Her daughter asked, looking up at her with wide eyes. Mia nodded, brushing a stray lock of hair out of her daughter's face. I'm fine, sweetie. Just tired, she lied, trying to push the worry aside. But deep down, she knew that things were far from fine. The phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her thoughts. She pulled it from her bag, expecting another cryptic message, but this time, it was a call. The unknown number. Mia hesitated. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to pretend like the past 24 hours hadn't happened. But the other part, the part that knew she couldn't run from, this forced her to answer. Hello, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. On the other end, a calm, deep voice answered. Mia, it said, the voice unmistakable. It was him. The vampire king. It's time you understood what's really happening, he continued. You are more involved in this than you think. Mia's heart thudded in her chest. What do you mean? What do you want from me? She asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm. You are a witness, Mia, the voice replied. But you are also a key player in something much bigger than yourself. I have been watching you for a long time. The words hit her like a ton of bricks. She had never signed up for this, never asked for any of this. She was just a waitress trying to take care of her daughter, trying to survive. I don't understand, Mia said, her voice cracking. You will, the voice replied. But first, you must meet me. Come to the address I am sending you. The line went dead before she could respond. Mia stood there, phone in hand, her mind reeling. The address flashed on the screen, and she stared at it, frozen in place. It was in the heart of the city, a place she knew well but had never dared to visit. The Vampire King wanted her to meet him. To what end? She didn't know, but she knew that there was no turning back. Whatever game was being played, she was already a part of it. She had no choice but to go. She spent the next few hours preparing herself, trying to push down the rising sense of dread. She couldn't let her daughter see how scared she was, how much she feared for her own safety. After what felt like an eternity, Mia left her apartment and made her way to the location. The streets were quieter than usual, as if the world had suddenly taken a breath and held it in anticipation. Her footsteps echoed in the silence as she neared the building. It was a tall, Gothic structure, dark and imposing. The air around it seemed thicker, heavier, as if something ancient and powerful was lurking within. As she stood in front of the building, Mia hesitated. She had no idea what awaited her inside, but she knew it wasn't just another meeting. This was the point of no return. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. The interior was dimly lit, with heavy curtains blocking out the light. The silence was deafening as she walked through the grand hallway, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. She could feel the weight of the walls around her, as though the building itself was watching her every move. At the end of the hallway, she saw him. The Vampire King. He stood with his back to her, gazing out of a large window that overlooked the city. His silhouette was imposing, his presence filling the room in a way that made Mia feel small and insignificant. But there was something else in the air, something that made her skin tingle. It was power, raw, undeniable power. You came, he said, his voice smooth, almost too calm. Mia couldn't bring herself to speak. She was frozen in place, her heart racing in her chest. Slowly, he turned to face her, his amber eyes locking onto hers. You have no idea what you're involved in, do you? He asked, his voice a low whisper that seemed to echo through the room. Mia shook her head, unable to find her voice. She didn't understand, but she knew she needed answers. You are here because you have been chosen, he continued, his gaze intense. Your connection to this world is deeper than you realize. Mia felt a chill run down her spine. What was he talking about? What did he mean by chosen? The Vampire King stepped forward, his movements graceful and deliberate. I can help you understand, he said, his tone almost gentle. But first, you must decide. Do you want to be a part of this world, or do you want to walk away and never look back? Mia's mind raced. She didn't know what to do, but one thing was clear. There was no walking away now. She had already crossed the line. The Vampire King's gaze lingered on Mia as she stood frozen in the center of the dimly lit room, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. She had entered this place willingly, but now she wasn't so sure she understood what she had gotten herself into. His words hung in the air like a heavy fog, impossible to escape. You've crossed a line, Mia. You've entered a world where the rules are different, where your every action has consequences. Mia swallowed hard, trying to gather her thoughts. She had no idea what he meant by being chosen, but something in her gut told her she was now part of something far more dangerous than she could comprehend. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King's lips curled into a slight smile, but there was nothing kind about it. He took a slow step toward her, his movements smooth, almost predatory. I want you to understand, he said softly, his voice like velvet. The world you've known is not the world you live in anymore. Mia's breath caught in her throat as his words sank in. Her life had been a routine, working at the restaurant, taking care of her daughter, living a quiet existence. But now she was caught in a web that was far beyond her understanding. I don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. You're a part of this world now, Mia. the Vampire King continued, his eyes never leaving hers. The message on the napkin was just the beginning. You've seen something you weren't supposed to see, and now you must decide what to do with that knowledge. Mia's heart pounded in her chest. The words didn't make sense. She was just a waitress. How had she ended up here? I don't want any part of this, Mia said, her voice more forceful this time, though doubt lingered in her mind. You don't have a choice, he replied calmly. Once you've seen what you have, there is no going back. You are already involved. Mia felt the weight of his words crush down on her, the reality of what was happening starting to settle in. She wasn't just a bystander. She was a player in this game, whether she liked it or not. What do you expect me to do? She asked, her voice trembling. The Vampire King stepped closer, his gaze never faltering. I expect you to decide. You can stay in the shadows, continue living your life, pretending you've seen nothing. Or, he paused, his voice lowering. You can step into the light, embrace the power that's been awakened within you, and join me. Mia shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. I'm just a waitress. I'm not part of whatever this is. I can't. You are, he interrupted, his voice firm. You are more than you think, Mia. You just don't realize it yet. And I can help you understand. He moved toward her, his steps silent on the cold marble floor. I'm not asking you to become one of us, he continued, his eyes flashing with a hint of something ancient and powerful. I'm asking you to choose. To choose whether you will stand with me or against me. Because the world you've entered is a world of power, and those who refuse to acknowledge that power are crushed beneath it. Mia's mind was spinning. The words felt like they were suffocating her, each one heavier than the last. She had always felt like an outsider, just going through the motions of life, trying to make things work for her daughter. But now, she felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into a world she had never known existed. What happens if I refuse? She asked, her voice barely audible. The Vampire King's gaze darkened slightly. Refusal is not an option. The world will move forward with or without you, Mia. But I would prefer you at my side. He stepped back, giving her a moment to process his words. Take some time to think about it. The choice is yours. But know this, there are those who will come for you. Those who want to use what you know for their own gain. They will not stop until they get what they want. And you will need to decide if you are strong enough to fight back. Mia stood there, frozen, her thoughts whirling. She had always tried to keep her head down, avoid trouble, and protect her daughter. But this was beyond anything she could have imagined. The Vampire King turned to leave, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Think about what I've said, Mia. You don't have much time. As he reached the door, he paused, glancing back over his shoulder. I will be watching. And with that, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Mia alone in the cold, oppressive silence of the room. She stood there for a long time, her heart racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her world had changed in an instant, and now she had to decide how to move forward. Could she really turn her back on everything she had known? Or was it time to step into the unknown and embrace whatever power the Vampire King had spoken of? As the minutes stretched on, Mia knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back. Mia spent the rest of the night sitting in her apartment, unable to sleep. The Vampire King's words echoed in her mind like a constant drumbeat. You are more than you think. You just don't realize it yet. She couldn't stop replaying the moment when he'd looked at her with those amber eyes, like he could see straight through her. She had never felt more exposed in her life. The weight of his gaze made her feel both small and insignificant, yet strangely important in ways she couldn't comprehend. The choice he had given her seemed impossible. Could she really step into this dangerous world? Was she strong enough to fight back against whatever powers were after her? And what about her daughter? Mia couldn't risk dragging her into something like this. She had to protect her at all costs. But what if she had no choice? What if the Vampire King was right, and she was already entangled in something far beyond her control? As dawn broke, Mia found herself standing at the window, staring out at the city she had always known. The streets were calm, peaceful, but in her heart, Mia knew the peace was just an illusion. Her world had already shifted, and there was no going back. She had to make a decision. The message from the Vampire King had been clear. She was already a part of this world, and there was no way to hide from it. But even as she wrestled with the fear and uncertainty inside her, part of her couldn't deny the pull. The world the Vampire King had spoken of, the power he had alluded to. It called to her in ways she couldn't explain. She wanted to know more. She wanted to understand what had been hidden from her for so long. The sudden ringing of her phone cut through her thoughts, and Mia's heart skipped a beat. It was an unknown number. Her hand trembled as she answered it. Mia. The voice on the other end was smooth, familiar. It was him again, the Vampire King. It's time. His words were simple, but the weight behind them was enough to make her breath catch. Time for what? Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You've made your choice, he replied. Come to me. There's no more running. Mia's stomach twisted. She knew this was the moment. She had to face whatever was coming, whatever she was involved in now. Her heart beat wildly in her chest as she tried to steady herself. Where do I go? She asked, her voice cracking with uncertainty. I'll send you the details, he said, his tone calm, almost too calm. Just be ready. Time is of the essence. The call ended abruptly, and Mia was left standing in the silence of her apartment. She stared at her phone, her fingers numb against the screen. There was no more time for hesitation. She had to go. She had to face whatever this was. Within minutes, a message appeared on her phone, providing an address. It was in the heart of the city, a place she had never been before, a place that seemed to hold the answers to the questions that had plagued her since the moment she met the Vampire King. As she read the address, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her daughter's voice from the other room. Mommy, where are you going? Mia froze, her heart aching. She turned to see her daughter standing in the doorway, her little face filled with concern. I have to go to work, sweetie, Mia said, her voice strained. But don't worry, I'll be back soon. Her daughter didn't look convinced. Promise you'll come back? She asked, her big eyes full of innocence. Mia knelt down to her level, brushing a stray lock of hair from her daughter's face. I promise, she said, trying to sound reassuring, even though she didn't know what would happen next. She had no idea what she was walking into, but one thing was clear, her daughter couldn't be a part of this. Mia kissed her daughter's forehead, standing up and turning away. She grabbed her coat and headed for the door, feeling the weight of her decision settle over her like a heavy cloak. The streets outside were busy, the city alive with the usual bustle of the morning. But to Mia, everything felt different. The world had shifted, and she was no longer just a waitress trying to make ends meet. She was something more, whether she was ready for it or not. The address led her to a tall, imposing building in the middle of the city's business district. It looked out of place among the modern glass towers, its architecture ancient and dark. Mia stood at the entrance, looking up at the towering structure, feeling a sense of dread wash over her. This was it. There was no turning back now. As she entered the building, the air seemed to thicken, the temperature dropping noticeably. The silence in the lobby was unnerving. She walked slowly, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. She followed the instructions in the message, moving through a labyrinth of hallways, each one darker than the last. Finally, she reached a door at the end of the hallway. It was ornate, made of dark wood with intricate carvings. Mia hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath before she knocked. The door opened almost immediately, revealing the Vampire King standing in the shadows. His presence was overwhelming, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. You came, he said, his voice a low murmur. I knew you would. Mia stepped inside, feeling a chill run through her. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing her inside. This was the moment she had been dreading and anticipating all at once. The Vampire King was waiting, and now she had to face him, and whatever world he was about to reveal. Mia stepped into the dimly lit room, the door closing softly behind her with a click that seemed to echo in the heavy silence. The Vampire King stood in the shadows, his amber eyes gleaming faintly in the low light, watching her with an intensity that made her feel both small and exposed. Every step she took toward him felt like a step deeper into the unknown, the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulders. She could feel the pulse of her heart, each beat loud in her ears. The room was cold, colder than anything she had felt before, and yet there was a strange warmth in the Vampire King's presence, something dangerous and magnetic. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves, but the truth was, she had no idea what to expect. You've made the right choice, the Vampire King said, his voice smooth and commanding, yet there was an undercurrent. of something almost reassuring in it. You've stepped into a world far different from the one you knew. And now, you must accept it. Mia took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She wanted to ask him so many questions, but she didn't know where to start. "What do you want from me?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King moved toward her, his steps graceful, deliberate. "I want you to understand, Mia. This world is not as simple as the one you've left behind. There are forces at work here that are beyond your comprehension, but you can learn. You can become something greater than you ever imagined." Mia's heart raced in her chest. "I don't understand." "Why me?" she asked, her voice shaky. The Vampire King stopped just inches from her, his gaze never leaving hers. "You were always meant for this," he replied, his voice low. "Your connection to this world is not by chance. You've always been a part of it, even if you didn't know it." His words sent a shiver down her spine. "What do you mean?" she asked, her confusion deepening. "You've been marked," he said simply, his voice calm but filled with an undeniable power. "You don't realize it, but your bloodline has been intertwined with ours for centuries. You are the key to something greater, something ancient." Mia's head spun. What was he talking about? Her bloodline? How could she possibly be connected to this world of vampires? "I don't have any special bloodline," she said, shaking her head, disbelief written across her face. "I'm just a waitress, just a normal person." The Vampire King's lips curled into a faint smile. "That is where you are wrong, Mia," he said, his tone suddenly colder. "You are not just a normal person. You are the last of your kind." The last of her kind? Mia's mind reeled with the implications of his words. What did he mean? What kind of world was she stepping into? "You are the descendant of a powerful bloodline," the Vampire King continued, his voice dark and filled with an ancient weight. "Your ancestors made a pact with ours, one that has been passed down through generations. That pact has remained hidden until now." "What pact?" Mia asked, her voice rising with frustration. "What does this have to do with me?" "Everything," the Vampire King replied, his voice becoming more urgent. "The pact your ancestors forged with us was designed to keep both our worlds in balance. But it's weakening. And you, Mia, are the key to restoring it." Mia felt her stomach churn. "I don't want to be part of this," she said, her voice filled with fear. "I just want to live my life. I don't want to be caught up in some ancient pact." The Vampire King stepped back, his expression hardening. "You have no choice. The balance is slipping, and the consequences will be catastrophic. The enemies of our kind are closing in, and you are the only one who can help stop them." Mia's mind raced as she tried to process everything. She had always been just a normal person, someone who worked hard to provide for her daughter. Now, she was being told that she had a connection to an ancient world of vampires, and that her bloodline was somehow tied to their survival. "I can't," she said, shaking her head. "I'm not ready for this." The Vampire King's gaze softened for a brief moment, as if he were truly considering her words. "No one is ever ready," he said, his voice filled with a strange empathy. "But sometimes, we don't get a choice. You've been chosen, Mia, and now, you must decide whether you will fight to protect this world, or watch it fall." Mia felt the weight of his words sink in. Her life had changed overnight, and now she was standing at a crossroads. The Vampire King was right about one thing: she didn't have a choice. The enemies he spoke of were real, and they were coming for her daughter, and for everything she had ever known. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The Vampire King stepped forward, his expression resolute. "You must stand with me, Mia," he said. "Together, we can stop the forces that threaten our world. But you must accept your fate." Mia closed her eyes, the weight of the decision crashing down on her. She had never asked for this, never wanted any of it. But now, she knew there was no turning back. She had to make a choice, and whatever choice she made, her life would never be the same. Mia stood in the shadow of the Vampire King, her heart pounding with each word he spoke. The decision weighed on her, but there was no turning back. She could feel the shift in the air around her, the tension rising as the realization sank in. She was no longer just a bystander in her own life. Everything she thought she knew about her world was unraveling, and now, she had to face what lay ahead. The Vampire King's gaze was unwavering, as though he could see every doubt and fear running through her mind. His amber eyes held no malice, only the weight of centuries of power. "You have the strength within you, Mia," he said, his voice low and soothing, yet carrying an undeniable force. I can teach you how to harness it, but only if you choose to stand with me. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. It felt as though she was drowning in his gaze, unable to break free from the pull of his presence. She was caught between the life she had always known and the unknown future that was now being thrust upon her. Why me? She finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Why am I the one who has to make this choice? The Vampire King's lips curled into a faint smile. Because your bloodline is the key, Mia. The pact your ancestors made was not just a simple agreement. It was a binding force that ties our worlds together. And now, it is your turn to carry that burden. Mia's heart raced as she tried to process his words. She had always thought of herself as ordinary, just a woman trying to make a living, take care of her daughter, and survive the challenges life threw her way. But now, she was being told that she was part of something much larger, something that had been set in motion long before she was born. But I'm not ready for this, Mia said, shaking her head. I don't know anything about this world. I don't know how to fight, or even what I'm supposed to be doing. The Vampire King's expression softened, though his eyes still held that penetrating intensity. No one is ever truly ready, he said gently. But sometimes, we don't have the luxury of preparation. The world we live in is in constant flux, and the forces that have been quietly working behind the scenes are now moving. And they will stop at nothing to achieve their goals. He paused for a moment, as if weighing his next words. You have a choice, Mia. You can walk away and try to return to your old life. But know this, if you do, they will come for you. The enemies of our kind will find you, and they will not be merciful. Or, he continued, his voice deepening, you can embrace your role, learn to wield the power within you, and fight alongside me. But the choice is yours to make. Mia's breath caught in her throat. The weight of his words pressed down on her, and for a moment, she felt paralyzed by the enormity of it all. Could she really walk away from this world that had been thrust upon her? Could she leave her daughter unprotected, knowing that these ancient forces would hunt her down? No, she couldn't. Mia looked up at the Vampire King, her mind racing, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of determination. She couldn't let fear control her, not when her daughter's safety was at stake. What do I need to do? She asked, her voice steady but filled with a resolve she hadn't known she possessed. The Vampire King nodded, as if he had been expecting her decision all along. Good, he said, his voice filled with approval. First, you need to understand the basics. The power within you is not just about strength or magic. It's about understanding the balance between our worlds. You will need to learn to control it, or it will control you. Mia felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of power are we talking about? She asked, her voice tinged with fear. The Vampire King stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. You will learn to harness the bloodline within you, Mia. You will learn how to protect yourself, how to fight back when the time comes. You will not be alone in this. I will guide you, but you must trust me. He paused, his eyes scanning her face. And trust yourself. Mia's heart thudded in her chest as she processed his words. Could she really do this? Could she truly become someone who could fight against the forces that were threatening not just her, but everything she had ever known? She wasn't sure, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life had already changed. There was no going back. The Vampire King turned away from her, his movements graceful and purposeful. Follow me, he said, leading her down the dark hallway. Mia followed him, her mind still reeling from the gravity of the decision she had just made. As they reached a door at the end of the hall, the Vampire King paused. You are not alone in this, he said. There are others who have walked this path before you. I will introduce you to them. Together, we will prepare for the challenges ahead. Mia nodded, though her thoughts were still spinning. She had made her choice, but the path ahead was uncertain. And as she stepped into the room behind him, she realized that the journey she was about to begin would change everything. Her old life was gone. The new one had begun. Mia stepped into the room behind the Vampire King, her mind still spinning from the decision she had just made. The door closed silently behind her, and for a moment, she was engulfed by the darkness of the room. The faint glow of candles cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the space feel even more intimidating. She stood there, unsure of what to expect next, but the Vampire King's presence was undeniable. He had made it clear that there was no turning back. She was now part of a world she never imagined, and she had to be prepared for what lay ahead. You made the right choice. The Vampire King's voice broke through the silence, calm but filled with a hidden power. Mia turned to face him, her heart still racing. What happens now? She asked, her voice betraying the uncertainty she felt. He gave a slight nod, his amber eyes locking onto hers. Now, you begin your training. You'll learn the ways of our world, how to defend yourself, how to protect what matters. And you will learn what it means to be part of this. Mia swallowed hard. She had no idea what this world entailed, but something deep inside her told her that she had no choice but to learn. If she didn't, the consequences would be too great to bear. I'm ready, she said, her voice firm, even though doubts still lingered in the back of her mind. The Vampire King stepped toward her, his presence overwhelming. Good, he said, a hint of approval in his voice. But you must understand, this is not just about learning how to fight. It's about understanding the balance between our worlds. There are forces at play here that are older and more powerful than anything you've ever known. And they are closing in. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She had always thought that her life was ordinary, but now she was being told that the stakes were much higher than she could have imagined. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. The Vampire King's eyes darkened. I mean that there are others like me, who seek to control everything. They don't care about the balance. They don't care about the consequences. They will stop at nothing to achieve their goal, and they will use whatever means necessary to do so. And they will come for you, Mia. Mia's pulse quickened. She felt the weight of his words settle in her chest, the gravity of the situation hitting her fully. Why me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Because you are the key, he replied. Your bloodline, the pact your ancestors made, it all ties into this. You have a power within you that you don't even fully understand yet. But once you do, once you learn how to wield it, you will be able to protect yourself, and you will be able to protect others. Mia's head spun. She didn't feel powerful. She felt scared, small, and completely out of her depth. How am I supposed to do that? She asked, her voice cracking. I don't know anything about this world, and I don't know if I'm strong enough. The Vampire King stepped closer, his eyes softening slightly. Strength doesn't come from power alone, Mia. It comes from understanding who you are, what you're willing to fight for. You will find that strength within you. I will help you find it. He paused, letting his words sink in. But first, you must trust me. Mia looked up at him, uncertainty still clouding her thoughts. Trust was not something she gave easily, but something about the way he spoke, something in the way he carried himself, made her want to believe him. She nodded slowly, the weight of her decision still pressing down on her. I'll trust you, she said, though doubt still lingered in her heart. The Vampire King gave her a faint smile, one that almost seemed approving, though it was hard to tell with the icy mask he usually wore. Good. You will need that trust in the days to come. Now follow me. It's time for you to meet those who will help guide you through this process. He turned and led her through the dimly lit corridor, his footsteps soundless on the cold marble floor. Mia followed, her mind racing with questions, but she stayed silent. She didn't know what else to ask, and she wasn't sure if she would get any answers. As they reached the end of the hall, the Vampire King stopped in front of a large door. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Behind this door are others like you, he said. They, too, are part of the pact. They have walked the path you are about to walk, and they will help you understand what is at stake. Mia's heart beat faster. She had no idea what to expect, but something in her gut told her that everything was about to change. What should I expect? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King's eyes gleamed with something dark and ancient. Expect the truth, he said. The truth about this world, the truth about your power, and the truth about the enemies we face. And most of all, expect to be tested. This is the beginning, Mia. The beginning of a journey that will either save or destroy everything. Mia took a deep breath as he pushed the door open, revealing a room filled with figures standing in the shadows. They were all watching her, their eyes gleaming with the same intensity that had once unsettled her when she first encountered the Vampire King. This was her new reality, and she had no choice but to face it. The door closed behind her, and Mia realized there was no going back now. Mia stepped into the room, her breath caught in her throat. The air felt thick with anticipation, and for a moment, she wasn't sure if she could move. The Vampire King had led her into a vast, darkened space, the walls lined with ancient tapestries and dimly lit candles casting long shadows across the floor. Standing in the center of the room were figures that seemed to blend into the darkness, their eyes glowing faintly as they watched her enter. She could feel their gaze, intense and unsettling, but she couldn't bring herself to look away. The Vampire King stood beside her, his presence as commanding as ever. "These are the ones who will help guide you," he said, his voice carrying through the room like a soft command. "They have all walked the path you are about to walk, and they will teach you what you need to know." Mia swallowed hard. She hadn't expected to be thrust into a room full of strangers, people who seemed just as dangerous and mysterious as the Vampire King himself. Her mind raced with questions, but she kept silent, unsure of how to approach them. One of the figures stepped forward, a tall woman with striking silver hair and pale skin that seemed to glow in the candlelight. Her eyes were a sharp, icy blue, and when she spoke, her voice was cold and steady. "So, you're the one," she said, her gaze scanning Mia from head to toe. "The one who's been chosen." Mia felt a shiver run down her spine. "I didn't ask for this," she replied, her voice steady but with a trace of frustration. "I don't know what I'm doing here." The woman's lips curled into a faint smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "None of us do at first," she said, her tone almost amused. "But you'll learn. You'll have to, if you want to survive." Another figure, a man this time, stepped forward. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark, almost black hair and a look that was both intimidating and calculating. His eyes were a deep shade of green, piercing and unblinking as he studied Mia. "I'm Lucas," he said simply, his voice low but with an edge to it. "And if you're serious about learning, you'll need to follow our lead." Mia felt the weight of his gaze, but she didn't look away. She had come this far, and there was no going back now. "I'm ready," she said, her voice more certain than she felt. "What do I need to do?" The Vampire King nodded, his expression unreadable. "The first thing you need to understand is that you are not the person you used to be," he said. "The blood that runs through your veins has the power to change everything. But with that power comes responsibility." Mia clenched her fists at her sides. She still couldn't believe what was happening. One moment, she was just a waitress, trying to make ends meet. Now, she was being told that she was part of something ancient, something far beyond her understanding. "What do you mean by responsibility?" she asked, her voice filled with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The Vampire King's amber eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, he seemed to consider her words. "Your power is tied to the balance of our worlds," he said. "If it falls out of balance, there will be consequences, not just for you, but for everything you know." Mia felt her stomach tighten. "And if I don't learn to control it?" she asked, the fear creeping into her voice. "Then you risk losing everything," Lucas answered bluntly. "This world is filled with enemies who would stop at nothing to use your power for their own gain. If you don't learn to defend yourself, to understand what's at stake, you won't last long." Mia's heart raced. She had no idea what she was up against, but one thing was clear, she had to learn. "So, where do we start?" she asked, her voice steady now, though her mind was a whirlwind of questions. The woman with silver hair stepped forward, her gaze never leaving Mia. "We begin with the basics," she said. "You need to learn the language of our world, how to recognize the signs, how to protect yourself from the dangers that lurk in the shadows." Mia nodded, feeling the weight of her decision pressed down on her shoulders. She had no choice but to follow their lead. "What else do I need to know?" she asked, her voice still tinged with uncertainty. Lucas's eyes darkened. "You need to understand that this isn't just about learning to fight," he said. "It's about understanding who you are, what you're capable of. The strength you'll need doesn't just come from physical power. It comes from knowing yourself, knowing what you're willing to fight for." Mia stared at him, trying to grasp the weight of his words. "And what if I'm not ready?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King stepped forward, his gaze intense. "No one is ever ready," he said. "But you'll have no choice but to rise to the challenge. The world is changing, Mia, and the choice you make now will determine everything." The room grew quieter as the others watched her, their faces unreadable. Mia could feel the weight of their expectations, the pressure to become something she had never imagined. But in that moment, she knew one thing for certain. Her old life was gone, and there was no going back. She had to learn to survive in this new world. And she would do whatever it took to protect herself and those she loved. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice stronger now. The Vampire King gave her a slight nod. "Good," he said. "Then let's begin." Mia followed the Vampire King and the others through the dark corridors, the weight of the decision still heavy on her shoulders. As they moved, the space around her seemed to grow more oppressive, the walls closing in with each step. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows that danced eerily along the stone floor. Her thoughts were racing, a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and uncertainty. She was walking into a world she barely understood, and every step forward felt like a leap into the unknown. "This is it," she thought to herself, trying to steady her breath. "There's no turning back now." The Vampire King led her into a large, open room at the end of the hallway, the air thick with the scent of old books and the faint, metallic tang of magic. The room was lined with shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with ancient tomes and scrolls that seemed to hum with power. In the center of the room, a large table was covered in maps, artifacts, and strange symbols. The others gathered around the table, their expressions focused, their voices low as they discussed what Mia couldn't yet comprehend. "This is where you will begin your training," the Vampire King said, his voice carrying authority that made the room fall into a deep, almost reverent silence. Mia stood at the edge of the table, still trying to take everything in. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the nerves gnawing at her insides. The Vampire King turned to her, his amber eyes gleaming. "First, you must learn the ways of our world, the rules that govern it, the power that sustains it, and the enemies that threaten it. You must understand everything before you can truly wield the power within you." Mia nodded, trying to absorb his words. The idea of training seemed so surreal, so far beyond the life she had known. "But how do I start?" she asked, her voice almost pleading for guidance. The woman with silver hair, who had spoken to her earlier, stepped forward. "You start by learning to control your emotions," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The power within you is tied to your emotions. If you cannot control them, you cannot control the power." Mia frowned, confused. "What do you mean? How are my emotions tied to this power?" The woman's gaze softened, though it was still piercing. "Your bloodline is different from ours," she explained. "The pact your ancestors made connects you to both worlds, the human world and the vampire world. The power you possess comes from that connection, but it is volatile. If you let your emotions overwhelm you, the power will consume you instead of helping you." Mia felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "So, I have to control my feelings to control the power?" she asked, still not fully understanding. The Vampire King nodded. "Exactly. Fear, anger, and doubt will cloud your judgment. You must learn to master them if you want to survive." Mia took a deep breath. The thought of controlling her emotions, especially after everything that had happened, seemed almost impossible. But she knew that if she wanted to survive, she had no choice. "How do I start?" she asked, her voice steady. The woman with silver hair stepped closer, placing her hands on the table. "We will begin with meditation," she said. "It will help you center yourself, calm your mind, and focus your energy." Mia nodded, trying to calm the growing storm inside her. She had faced many challenges in her life, but this was different. This was a world of ancient power, a world where the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. She had to be ready. "Close your eyes," the woman instructed. "Focus on your breathing. Let the outside world fade away." Mia did as she was told, taking a deep breath. She focused on the rise and fall of her chest, the rhythm of her breathing, trying to block out the distractions around her. As she concentrated, she began to feel the tension in her body slowly start to release, but her mind was still racing. The Vampire King's words echoed in her head. "If you cannot control your emotions, you cannot control the power." The weight of that thought made it harder to focus. But she forced herself to breathe deeper, slower, trying to push away the doubts and fears that had crept into her mind. Slowly, a calmness began to settle over her, like a cool wave washing away the heat of her panic. The world around her seemed to fade, and for a moment, she felt like she was floating, untethered from the chaos of her thoughts. Good. The woman's voice broke through the stillness. You're starting to understand. Mia opened her eyes, blinking against the brightness of the room. The Vampire King and the others were watching her, their expressions unreadable. That's it? Mia asked, still feeling the weight of the moment. That's just the beginning, the Vampire King replied. You will need to practice every day. The power within you is only as strong as your control over it. And right now, it's still unstable. But you're on the right path. Mia nodded, the truth of his words sinking in. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she had made the choice to be here, to face what was coming. She had to learn to control the power, to master her emotions. There was no other way. Now, we begin the next phase, the Vampire King said, his voice filled with quiet authority. You will need to train with the others. Learn from them. They are the ones who will help you prepare for what lies ahead. Mia looked at the group around her, her mind still swirling with everything she had learned. But now, there was no more fear. There was only determination. She had taken the first step into this new world, and she was ready to face whatever came next. Mia stood in the center of the grand training room, the weight of the Vampire King's words still heavy on her shoulders. For the past few weeks, she had been practicing every day, learning to harness the power that flowed through her blood. The training had been grueling, filled with intense lessons in combat, control, and the intricacies of the ancient world she had now become a part of. It wasn't easy, but she was determined. She had to be. The Vampire King had warned her that if she didn't learn to control her power, it would consume her, and she would become a threat to herself and everyone around her. The thought of losing control was terrifying, but she was starting to feel the faintest stirrings of the strength within her. She had come a long way since the first day she had entered this world, uncertain and afraid. Now, there was a quiet confidence within her, though doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. She could hear footsteps approaching, and she turned to see the Vampire King walking toward her. His expression was as unreadable as ever, but there was something in his eyes that made her heart race. You've come a long way, he said, his voice steady but filled with a rare trace of approval. Mia stood tall, meeting his gaze. I'm ready, she said, though she wasn't sure if she truly believed those words herself. Ready for what? The Vampire King asked, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. Ready to face what's coming, Mia replied, her voice firm. The Vampire King's smile faded, replaced by a look of seriousness. It's not just about the power, Mia, he said, his voice low. It's about the choices you make. The path you choose will shape the fate of everything, and you must be prepared to make those choices. Mia nodded, her heart beating faster. She had learned so much, but the weight of responsibility still felt like a heavy burden on her shoulders. I understand, she said, though the words didn't feel quite real yet. Do you? He asked, his eyes sharp as they bore into hers. Do you understand the gravity of what you've agreed to? Mia hesitated for a moment, her mind racing. She had been training, learning everything she could, but the true nature of her role had only begun to sink in. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was part of something much bigger, something that could change the course of history. I do, she said finally, her voice stronger this time. And I'm ready to do whatever it takes to protect this world. The Vampire King studied her for a moment before nodding. Very well, he said. Then it's time for you to face your first true test. Mia's heart skipped a beat. Her first true test? She had no idea what that would entail, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. What do I have to do? She asked, her voice steady but with a trace of anxiety. The Vampire King stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. You will face an enemy, he said. One who has been watching you, waiting for you to show weakness. And when you do, they will strike. Mia's breath caught in her throat. An enemy? She hadn't been prepared for this. Who is it? She asked, trying to steady her racing pulse. The Vampire King's expression darkened. Someone who knows your bloodline and seeks to use it for their own gain. Someone who will stop at nothing to control you, to control everything. Mia's stomach tightened. This was real. The training, the power, it wasn't just for show. She was about to be tested in ways she never could have imagined. And what do I do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You fight, he said, his tone unwavering. You fight to protect what matters. To protect yourself. And you show them that you are not someone to be controlled. Mia stood tall, the weight of his words settling in her chest. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, but she knew one thing. She couldn't back down now. She had already made her choice. She had stepped into this world, and now she had to fight to survive. "I will," she said, her voice strong. "I'll fight." The Vampire King nodded, his expression softening ever so slightly. "Good," he said. "Then let's begin." He turned and gestured for her to follow. Mia took a deep breath and followed him into the next room, where her first true test awaited. As she stepped forward, her heart pounded in her chest, but there was no fear this time, only determination. She had trained for this. She had prepared herself, and now she would prove that she was more than just a waitress. She was something far more powerful, and she would fight for her place in this world. The door to the next room creaked open, and Mia stepped inside, ready to face whatever came next. She had no idea what awaited her, but one thing was clear. She was no longer the person she once was. She was a force to be reckoned with, and nothing would stand in her way.